Chapter 84 to 87. Recovering from birth had saved me from the need to openly mourn Otto Hightower until long after his body had been sent home to be interred alongside the Hightowers of old. Yet from the moment I began my slow return to politics, I was forced to make a show of it. For all that his death was an inconvenience, I did not grieve for Otto's death. I only wished that I had not been so foolish and summoned him to King's Landing in the time frame I had. His death had sealed the fate of Dorne, but my foolishness had allowed him to set in motion the events that spelled its doom. My return to politics coincided with the lords eager for war beginning their mass arrivals in the city, and the first of the notable guests was Lord Boros Baratheon. Having finally proved myself fertile, he was eager to discuss putting the future betrothal between my firstborn son and his daughter. Although he was happy to inform me, I could choose which daughter. A generous man to a fault, that one. I was not surprised Lady Elenda jabbed him in the ribs before asking after the children. Jocelyn, he said, and his voice was mild as if he were forcing what he truly felt from his tone. Cousin Rhaenys must be thrilled. Mother is in love with both her and Alice, said Laenor cheerfully. I did not miss the slight tension in his body though as he picked up on what I had. Boros fixed a bland smile into place and quickly handed Jocelyn to his wife. Lady Elenda Baratheon née Karen was a pretty enough with dark hair and eyes. She was also 5 years younger than her husband. She was my age and had already had 3 children, one of which had just turned 6. Ugh. Princess Alyssa is quite the beautiful child, he said, with much more genuine warmth, as he moved to stand over her tank. I pray she is as beautiful as her mother one day. I have no doubt she will be the darling of the realm. His words were practiced and stilted. When he delivered them anyway, Lady Elenda favored him with an encouraging smile despite Jocelyn's anger and volume. Thank you, Lord Boros, I replied, getting ready to intervene should Jocelyn's tantrum become too much for Lady Elenda. She didn't seem to mind so far. She was cradling my screaming daughter with a look of pure amusement on her face. I can say with certainty that this one has far too much Baratheon in her, she finally said, handing her back over. Cassandra and her sisters were much the same. She only quiets for her grandmother, I replied, and Boros snorted. Besides me, Laenor bristled slightly, so I distracted him by handing him his daughter. She did not stop her crying, but at the sight of her father she calmed a little. If they are anything like my daughters. There was pride in his voice when he said that was surprising. Then she will be trial until your dying day. Yet she will be worth every headache and argument. That's incredibly sweet of you, Boros. I did not see that coming. Lady Elenda laid a hand on his leg and smiled, earning herself a look of puppy love in return. Perhaps our daughters should be friends in the coming years, I suggested. Boros turned to me and then his wife and then to me again. Friends are good, my girls will be fierce friends, but I would prefer your support for my Cassandra instead. That made me blink in surprise. At my surprise, he flushed and turned to his wife again. She gave him an exasperated look and then sighed. I must lay the blame for this squarely on yourself, Your Grace. For all that she was trying to make a joke of it, there was resentment in her tone. Oh hells, what had I done now? I do not recall making any inflammatory statements about the Stormlands or implying absolute primogeniture would be a thing. You have my sincerest apologies, Lady Elenda, but I confess myself unsure of my crime, I said quickly. Elenda pursed her lips. I was 3 and 10 when I gave birth to my Cassandra. I had difficulty conceiving until little Maris came along when I was 7 and 10. As you know, I have had Ellen most recently. I look forward to another. A son, I hope. Yet hearing of your midwives has convinced my great lummox of a husband that he has somehow hurt me. Damaged my ability to bear children. I'd be willing to bet he had. You have one more daughter to go and then it's going to be nothing until Olivar, born 7 days after Boros' death. Giving birth so young can damage a woman, yes, and my midwives do not recommend it, I said slowly. Boros looked downcast and Elenda's face twisted in annoyance. But surely your 2 daughters speak to that harm not being permanent in your case. See. I told you I was fine, hissed Elenda, and Boros blushed before taking her hand. From next to me, Jocelyn's sobbing quieted completely and I didn't let out a sigh of relief, but it was a near thing. I love my wife, but it may be I only have daughters. Should that be the case, Cassandra is my right and lawful heir, he said softly. I would have you support her. There are numerous cousins to my line that would seek to seize it. There are still houses that quietly claim the Storm King's blood. I wrote to my cousin's aid not because she was my cousin but because the law dictates she is the rightful head of House Aaron and her father's lawful heir. You need not ask for support that is already given, Lord Boros, I assured him. He beamed at me and then turned that smile on his wife. Elenda sighed and gave her husband's hand a squeeze. I will give my husband a son, your grace, but it does hearten me that should the worst happen, Cassandra would have your support. You did not care much for your 4 storms in canon, Lady Elenda. In fact, I would warrant you were downright nasty in some cases. Mind you, you were playing damage control I suppose. Aegon III had ascended the throne and you had to ingratiate yourself. He would not have looked kindly on those that condemned his older brother to death. Perhaps, Boros stopped as our eyes turned to him. Then he forged on. Perhaps we might retain the services of one of these midwives. Elenda's eyebrows nearly disappeared into her hairline and her lips pursed in disapproval. Boros ignored her in favor of directing pleading eyes at me. I have no issue with that. We seek to train more on Dragonstone soon enough. And soon Alanis would be leaving me to educate a further 30 women. Some to the faith, some to houses already interested. Thank you, your grace, he said and sat back, studiously ignoring his wife's outraged look. Then he eyed Laner, who had been silent throughout our little exchange, cradling the now sleeping Jocelyn. Heard you're putting together a strategy to Dornish. He spat the word Dornish as if it were some unforgivable curse. I expected Lady Elenda to shoot him that exasperated look once more at his demand but she looked cautiously interested too. Indeed. I would see them brought to heel. They have had their way too long. He was lying, of course, but we had to be seen as in favor of the war now. Too many wanted it, fighting it would not be prudent. Boros nodded. Lord Hightower said you were not in favor of it, he growled, as if it were an accusation of treachery. It probably was in his mind. I was not in favor of fighting a burned, half-destroyed mess, I interjected. Laner was of a different opinion. Then they made things personal and the argument became moot. Dorne was at its weakest after they ran headfirst into the trap at Bloodstone, said Laner, a little lamely to my ear, but at least he'd picked up on my plan. Boros was certainly examining him with a little more interest now. I had an idea to break the green blood and split Dorne in two. I have been forced to tweak my plan a little in recent months. Humph, said Boros. Lord Otto was keen to hear our advice on how best to tackle the Dornish. He also had the idea to send a fleet to break the green blood, said Elenda, and I did not miss the power, she slipped in there. My lord husband approved of his plan. To send 2 armies into the Boneway and Prince's Pass, right where they are strongest, asked Laner. They would bleed us sorely. Luckily, we have something of a trump card up our sleeves. Oh, asked Elenda, completely forgetting her husband was supposed to be the one more eager for war with Dorne. Marchers, what could you do? The Falcons. The army raised and trained to deal with the mountain clansmen of the Vale. Very good with mountainous terrain, shockingly, Laner boasted. They could do well to disarm much of the traps the Dornish may lay for us. Not to mention using my father's fleet and the Redwyne fleet to ferry a 3rd army into Dorne proper and the Lannister fleet to break the green blood. Ha! Then their precious mountains are rendered useless and they're stuck cowering in their deserts, laughed Boros. As we march 3 armies into Dorne and take everything, Laner finished. I remained quiet. I was quite sure that for all Boros liked the plan, he'd like it less when we discussed which army was going where and how we wouldn't be burning every bit of Dorne that was flammable. I would have to think on how to get him fully on board when the War Council began. He would be an important supporter to the plan that would see Dorne somewhat peaceful over the coming years and not a bloodbath trapped in the endless cycle of vengeance. Perhaps land could be taken from the Dornish. Will, perhaps. If anyone not named Will could even hold it. The castle itself would need to be razed, loyal Stormlanders shipped in. Oh gods, I'm doing it again. Westeros keeps getting to me. I'm going to be a monster by the end of it. I confess, Laner was saying when I finally finished wrestling with my morals. That the Falcons may need some outside help to secure the passes. Perhaps men who can buoy their numbers with familiarity to the terrain. My good father can provide those, Boros was quick to reply. His men often help scour the mountains. A directive of Lord Bormund, said Lady Elenda. He wished to deter raiders and another Vulture King. That sounds like Uncle Bormund, laughed Laner. A grim man but practical. Indeed, said Boros, scowling again. Tell me, Lord Boros, how are the Dornish responding to our preparations for war? I asked and his scowl deepened. Raids, he growled. They've raided near every land they could reach, drove refugees deeper into my lands and filched as much of the winter stores as they could manage. Well, shit. The Stormlanders were not likely to accept any plan that did not let them get revenge for that. Was this Aaron Dane's doing? Or Lord Walter Will, eager to provoke war in which his chosen candidate may return? When I deployed men to hit them back, they pulled into their passes and settled for slaughtering any scout patrols in the area, he finished. That's what they're like. They hit you at your weakest and then disappear like ghosts when you respond. They lure you into traps, poison your supplies or steal them outright, ambush you in the night. They'll use every amount of low cunning to bleed you, and when you are bled and exhausted, then they face you. We remained silent in the face of his hatred. Cowards, growled Elenda. All of them are cowards. Cravens. Bastards all. I caught Laener's eye. His face was grave. I had known the Dornish raided, to cause this much destruction and hatred. Boros would require bribery indeed to lend his support to a plan that would see his Marcher lords excluded from the main fight. We shall teach them how true men fight, my lord and lady, Laenor finally said. By the end, they'll know their folly. Viserys' new exercise regime was already doing wonders for him, I had to admit, as our procession made its way towards the docks. His healthy diet, devised by my own Maester Gerardis, and his almost religious fervor when it came to relearning his old skill with the blade had seen him drop the pounds in a drastic way over the past few weeks. The fact that he now wore Blackfire on his hip and his face bore a permanent almost scowl had him looking like an actual Targaryen king instead of some fat jolly fool. I was being unfair to him, I mused, he was a competent king. Under his rule the prosperity that had come to Westeros under Jaehaerys had only grown. The small folk and the nobles alike were well fond of him, and if it wasn't for the ongoing tension between the Blacks and the Greens I'd say he was quite the successful king. Actually I was being unfair there as well, he'd taken action in this timeline. He'd opened his eyes and he'd taken action. He'd reeled Alicent in, given me the capital, more trust that original Rhaenyra had ever received, and was actively stripping the Greens of their power. He had my back in the way the original Viserys never had his daughters. I wonder if he saw her as tainted by Daemon. Like he saw Alicent now. When she married him, did he give up entirely, decide he'd ride out his last years in blissful ignorance and let his whole horrible family fight it out after he was gone? Did he assume he had more time? Did he seek to raise Jaehaerys over Rhaenyra? Bah, who knew what was going on at that man's mind at times? The Arryn ships were already in the bay by the time we had arrayed ourselves to greet the Lady of the Vale. I noted with amusement that Rhea and Torrhen Manderly had positioned themselves close to our party, and the Lady of Runestone seemed to be almost giddy with excitement. The war for Dorne had put quite the dampener on her plans for a wedding at Runestone, but Viserys had offered the keep itself for a venue. I wished Laenor was here though. Or Lena. My husband was supervising Lena's armor fitting on Rhaenys orders. She'd wriggled out of it several times so far, with excuses ranging from Lucerys teething to the boy having a slight fever she was worried about. So I was left alone to assess the damage I had done to my relationship with Jane while he ensured his idiot sister didn't get herself killed in Dorne through sheer stubbornness. At least Jane was the only person of any note arriving today. I had been informed that even the elderly Rickon Stark would be putting in an appearance, alongside his brother. They had not arrived yet, but I was keen to meet them when I did. Rickon's loyalty, and by extension Cregan's, would be worth its weight in gold, or rather, worth its weight in the locally produced and very affordable glass I would ship into the north in return for their fealty. Once we managed to get it to stop shattering if you looked at it wrong, of course. I dragged my mind back to the present as a screech echoed out over the assembled nobles and Morgul plunged us all into brief shadow as it circled above us. A smile grew over my face. Helena's dragon had indeed grown over the few months she'd spent in the Vale. Gods, it felt like an age since I'd last seen her, and yet it had only been 4 months at the most. I could not wait to show her the twins. Jane was the first off of the ship, her head held high in the face of the assembled nobility that had come to greet her. Followed by the form of what could only be Lord Dennis, Jessamine Redfort and Helena. My grin became wider as my sister hopped down from the gangplank and stopped to survey us all, looking suddenly nervous. Then her eyes met mine and she beamed. The Arryn party reached us a moment later, and all the proper obeisances were observed, with Jane greeting Viserys as her king and liege and presenting his daughter to him. She looked well, she truly did. A few months had seen her sprout up an inch or two, and she was 7 now. How could I have forgotten? I must remember to ask her how she liked the book I sent her. Jane was all smiles when she greeted me, but I didn't miss the slight wariness behind her eyes. It was as if she expected me to spring an eligible bachelor on her the moment she let her guard down sufficiently. I felt guilty at that. I should have bothered to check with Ria or someone first. I should have taken her outburst during that meeting oh so long ago as a hint there was still a sore topic there. Cousin, I murmured as she kissed my cheeks in greeting. I can only apologize once again. She paused and then gave me a rueful smile. So Lady Royce tells me, she said finally, and I tried not to flinch at the icy tone the word Royce was said in. I have been informed you did not know of the events Aunt Emma had to intervene in. She was quite clear about that. I did not. I never would have broached the topic in that manner had I known. But you would have broached it. I opened my mouth to protest but Jane held a hand up. Let us discuss this later, cousin, in private. I do believe there is a certain sister of yours waiting to see you again. Helena got halfway through her, by now, well-practiced bow before I decided to hell with it and scooped her up into a hug. I didn't miss Viserys' broad grin at the sight of her delighted laugh as she buried her face in my collar and squeezed me tight. Can I see the babes? She asked. I'm their aunt, right? I should be able to see them. Of course. You cannot hold Alice yet, but there is Jocelyn. She looked puzzled at the idea of not holding Alice, but at the idea of seeing them her face cleared again and she beamed. We are also looking forward to seeing the babes, cousin, said Jane, and it took me a brief second to realize she was referring to Jess in that we given Jess was currently standing at the back of the crowd looking green. You are welcome at the manse any time, cousin, I replied as Viserys evidently decided to involve himself in family time and came over to join his daughters. I see my own daughter does not wish to embrace her father. He called with fake grief on his features. Truly, what has this world come to? She wriggled from my grasp a moment later and ran at him, picking up quite a bit of speed. He caught her and hauled her into the air, prompting a scream of delight. I would speak with you tonight, Rhaenyra, murmured Jane. I have a tale to tell you. Well, that was reassuring. It played on my mind the entire day, lurking constantly in my thoughts as I settled the various Vale men into the Red Keep and took Helena to see the babes. My sister was somewhat put out that holding Alice was not on the table yet, but she had enjoyed chatting to both of them about her various adventures in the Vale and when she'd been on Dragonstone. Jocelyn even got through an hour of storytelling without loudly informing us all of her unhappiness when it came to, well, anything. They must be fond of you, little one, they did not cry at all during your visit, I told Helena as we mounted horses to bear us back to the keep under the watchful eye of Ser Willis Fell, Ser Stefan elsewhere today. She swelled with obvious pride at that and turned to her own sworn sword. Did you hear, Byron? I'm going to be the best aunt they have, she enthused. The Reach man smiled warmly at her, genuine fondness in his gaze. I have no doubt you will, princess, he said with a smile. Then he, shockingly, directed a smile my way. Maybe the veil changed him. Now that I think about it, I hadn't detected a single sneer the entire time he had been in my presence. Ser Byron, I am glad to see you well, I said as we set off. Was there much trouble on your travels? Not at all, your grace. Your falcons have seen a drop in raids across the Vale, or so Lady Jane has informed me. Travel has become almost safe, he said, then indicated the sword he wore with a smile. I was rather looking forward to the practice, yet it seems my sword may become rusty yet. I'm told the finest knights come from the Vale, Ser Byron, perhaps you could find one to spar with? He took my jest in good humor, which was a relief. I have found a fair few willing to indulge me, your grace, he admitted. Ser Byron is a really good swordsman, said Helena, who had been watching our exchange with interest. He beats loads of people when he's practicing. Of course he is, little one, he is your sworn sword. Do you think we'd give you a terrible one? She giggled at that and Byron blushed. Have you kept up with your archery? Yes. Jane sent Ser Dennis to help me when he was at the Gates of the Moon. Lots of the falcons are very good archers as well, she told me, then launched into detailed explanation about what seemed like every bit of practice she'd engaged in. I listened to her speech with a grin on my face that did not fade until Jane met us at the keep and dispatched my talkative sister and her sword to prepare for tonight's feast. I, on the other hand, was invited on a walk around the gardens. Given that Jessamine Redfort was hovering around in the background looking like she was ready to start a physical fight with me should I say the wrong thing, I was not thrilled with the development. Still, the gardens were nice and I had promised myself I'd walk more in an effort to shift some of my baby weight. Do you wish for another apology? I asked when I was certain only Jess could hear us. Because I will give it freely. I was wrong to address the matter as brusquely as I did in a letter. Yet you think you were right to address the matter at all, she asked, voice sour. It is the succession of the veil. Without an heir of your body, the moment you die, the veil will go to war. Ser Arnold has children, there is Joffrey Arryn to consider and now the Gulltown Arryns as well, ennobled once more. At my reminder she scowled fiercely. Lady Royce said she enlightened you as to the incident your mother intervened in. Her voice shook and I felt guilty. I was given the bare bones of the matter, I told her. That Willem had tried to force a marriage before any of the Vale Lords could intervene and had arranged a secret marriage, all but bodily dragging a 6-year-old to the September. Bare bones, she muttered bitterly. I am surprised she would have the gall. And I am missing something once again, I said aloud. Jane paused and tried to control her expression, closing her eyes and swallowing hard at some memory or reminder. When she opened them again, there were unshed tears there and I winced at the upset I had caused. Yet no matter how much of an ongoing train wreck this was, it was a train wreck I needed to push. Jane needed an heir no one could challenge. I could not afford to be drawn into enforcing her will. Not if I had Dorne to think about these days as well. She was there, she hissed. Lady Royce was there in the September. She held me still when the Septon refused to marry us. I stared at my cousin in shock and surprise. Jane took a deep breath and I was reminded she was not even 19 yet. A young girl for all that she ruled a kingdom in all but name. I do not understand. Rhea cooperated with her father in his plot to have you married? At my shock Jane laughed bitterly and Jessamine placed a hand on her shoulder. She hated her father, she certainly was not fond of her brother, why would she? Leniency in her own marriage. At my look of incomprehension she sniffed and then took a deep breath. They wanted a babe from her. Daemon did not wish to give it without extracting a high price in turn. She never said what it was, but it was something she did not wish to do. Willem said he would speak to their father and win her some time if she helped him marry me. So she did. Horror made bile rise to my throat. At my silence, Jane rubbed at her shoulders and forged on. I used to have nightmares about her hands on my shoulders, she told me. Did she ever apologize? I asked. Jane shook her head. We always avoided the topic. I just wanted you to understand, that letter from her at Dash. She means she's been having nightmares since she got it and I'm bloody furious with you. Jessamine finally burst out. I stared in surprise at the girl who always seemed to melt into the background. She met my eyes with a glare, ready to leap to Jane's defense. I opened my mouth but no sound came out. I have a man in mind, Rhaenyra, said Jane, finally. But I would extract a price from you first. I stared down at my babes. Jocelyn was awake and wriggling about, looking as if she were still deciding on whether she wished to throw a tantrum or not. Alice, on the other hand, was fast asleep. Completely unaware of how special today was. A smile forced its way onto my features as I gazed at them. They'd grown so much in the last month since their birth, taking on the look of actual babies. Guilt rolled inside my guts then as I remembered Jane's request. Jocelyn had been sold to the Rains before her birth and now little Alice had her future planned for her as well. She would marry Jane's firstborn son and secure the Vale for another generation. She would give the Arryns what they had been deprived of in Diella, royal blood. And if Grover Tully wanted to get into a snit about the matter he could take a long walk off of a short pier. I had waited long enough for his reply to my inquiry about a betrothal. Laenor's hand found the small of my back as Alanis came forward and lifted the lid from Alice's tank. Which on are you taking? He asked. I didn't answer but bent over little Alice and scooped her into my arms. He laughed and retrieved Jocelyn. Happily, Jocelyn's threatened tantrum was due to a lack of attention because the moment she was picked up and held, her tears melted away. In my arms, Alice shifted in her sleep before her eyes opened. Look, said Laenor, breaking my moment of adoration. He moved closer. She's smiling at me. Is she smiling at me? Jocelyn had a beautiful smile. I dropped a kiss onto her forehead. Yes, Ser Laenor, she is, said Alanis. She would be leaving us soon. Off to train the new midwives that were being taught on Dragonstone. My fledgling school needed the prestige of having a teacher who'd attended to royalty. I did not want her to go. Something tells me she is fond of her father already. Do you think so? He asked eagerly and Alanis smiled warmly. Oh yes. Look at her smile. She recognizes you both now. Alice made a few grunting sounds and I turned my attention back to her and away from Laenor, trying not to weep at a smiling Jocelyn. Your father is a silly man, isn't he? He is, He's going to spoil you so much. You'll be spoilt rotten. Her unfocused eyes roamed about and I frowned despite myself. Is something wrong, Your Grace? Asked Alanis, having caught my worry. Perhaps I am worrying about nothing, but it seems to me Jocelyn tries to make eye contact when she's held. Alice does not, I told her. Alanis hummed thoughtfully. It's possible she's merely lagging behind her sister a little. She was confined to the incubator after all. I would not worry unless she fails to hit several milestones at the expected times, she assured me after a while. I glanced up and caught Laner's look of concern, then he tried to smile but could quite mask his own worry. Now we have her out and about, she will catch up to her sister in no time, he assured me. Then was immediately distracted by a flailing Jocelyn. Something tells me they'll have you wrapped around their fingers before they can walk, I said dryly. In response, he wiggled his finger at her and she clutched at it. There was a knock at the door and Ser Stefan poked his head in, looking slightly worn out. Your Grace, your father is starting a riot with his impatience. I understand. Tell them we shall be down momentarily. He nodded, then paused before leaving entirely. It should be noted, Your Grace, that Lady Rhaenys is ready to join him, he told me, and I let out a chuckle. Of course. No wonder Ser Stefan looked as if he had been on duty for the past 3 days with no rest or respite. Shall we go and rescue our loyal knight, husband? I asked, and Ser Stefan's look became one of pleading. Oh, it's the only honorable thing to do in this situation, he replied, and Ser Stefan looked relieved. We followed him out and down the hallways of the manse to the drawing room, packed full of family and friends, all eager to see the babes free from their tanks at last. Might we present Princess Jocelyn and Princess Alyssa of House Targaryen, said Laenor, pride evident in his voice. Rhaenys was first up to her son, lifting Jocelyn from his arms. I didn't have time to analyze just how much she'd melted due to the proximity of a babe named after her mother, because my father reached me a moment later, an expectant look on his face, and I him take her. He was gentle, oh so gentle, holding her as if he had spent his entire life holding babes. Then again, with 5 children, he'd had plenty of practice when it came to their care. She's beautiful, he said as she fussed in his arms, and I realized he was close to tears once again. Little Alyssa. My mother would have been proud. Father would have been, he would have been proud too. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I was saved from finding any kind of response to that statement by Rhea slamming to a halt beside me and peering intently at Alice's face before smiling widely at me. They're beautiful, niece. Behind her, Torrin Manderley hovered, looking distinctly out of place. Much like Jessamine Redfort was currently doing from her place beside Jane. I caught my cousin's eye and motioned her over. She tensed slightly, then forced a smile onto her face and managed to make her drift over look natural. Might I introduce you to Alyssa? I said when she was within speaking distance. Viserys half turned to her and very reluctantly offered the babe. Jane took her, accepting some of his pointers of how to hold her and support her head properly and such. She knew that this babe was promised to her as of yet unborn and unconceived son. I could see her evaluating her, trying to figure out if risking my wrath were worth it. We were saved from any awkwardness that brought by Helena seeking us out, evidently not finding much luck when trying to get Jocelyn and loudly demanding to see the baby. I took Alice back and bent down, letting Helena press forward for her first look at her niece not in her tank. She's small, she said, wonder filling her voice. Alice fussed against me, little hands coming up to wave around, letting her displeasure be known. Did I upset her? Not at all. She is overwhelmed. This is her first time outside the tank and there are a lot of people, I told her softly. Do you wish to hold her? I regretted it the moment I said it, of course, but Helena was ever so gentle when she took Alice from me, following all my instructions to the letter. I had feared that she would be jealous and that jealousy would drive her away from my children, but judging from the smile on her face when she handed Alice back, I had been wrong to fear that. I rose from my crouch and handed Alice off to an impatient Rhea Royce, who was happy to coo over her to Torrin. Then she was retrieved by Rhaenys and swapped for Jocelyn. I managed to reclaim my firstborn eventually, and I held her close, laughing quietly at her attempt to root through my clothing. Evidently someone was hungry. It had been a few hours since they had fed, I supposed. Unfortunately, when food was not forthcoming, Jocelyn decided to let us all know and raise quite the ruckus. The fact that Alice chose to copy her was just icing on the cake and did rather put a dampener on our little gathering. Still, it had served its purpose. Alice was out of her tank and everyone who was anyone in our little family had been given the chance to meet them and hold them, and hear them scream for food. If everything went well, then in 5 months' time I would present them to the court officially. I curled Jocelyn close to me at the thought as she wailed unhappily. Well, we still had Ria's wedding to go, and boy did I have mixed feelings about my aunt at the moment, but new life was new life. After the wedding, the War Council would begin in truth. The greatest assembly of lords since the Great Council, all squarely focused on kicking Dorne into the dirt. Lena helped me get into a position to feed the babes, smiling at my embarrassment as she did so. I do not understand why you are so flustered about it all. Did you forget I used to help you bathe? She chuckled. Look, just accept it's a complex, okay? I protested. That made her laugh even harder and then bring her hand to my cheek and her lips to mine. Okay, she said, slowly, as I realized I'd let an anachronism sneak into my words again. Yet I have still seen everything long before now. Come now, feed your babes before they rouse the whole of King's Landing with their cries. She passed Jocelyn over and worked on calming Alice as her twin fed. Thankfully, she kept her eyes mostly averted until it came to swapping twins. I do not understand what embarrassed me so much about the process. It certainly did not embarrass anyone else around me. How will you handle feeding them when you become regent? She asked, carefully avoiding the topic that she would not be there to help. They will be past 6 months then. Old enough for feeding morning, noon and night with some mush to keep them going throughout the day, I told her. It had been one of the first things I'd worked out after their birth. I had to balance being taken seriously as a ruler and making sure the kids were okay. Alice detached and gave a contented gurgle, curling her little hand into her swaddling clothes. Come, let me help you dress again. Mother and Laenor will be eager to present them with their gifts. There was a smirk in place as she took the twins from me and handed them off to Laenor, who waited just outside. Then she helped me dress and I noted that she had improved greatly. A far cry from the woman who once managed to literally tie her hand to my back. When I said as much, she blushed such a vibrant red that it sent me into hysterics. They were already in their cribs when we reached the room. Rhaenys stood by Jocelyn with her proffered egg in hand, and I took the one I had selected for Alice from Syrax's clutch. The one Rhaenys cradled was beautiful. A scarlet like Malaise with bronze patterns across it. My own was a pleasing inversion. Forest green with swirls of gold. Together, almost reverentially, we placed the eggs at the girl's side. Jocelyn was quick to focus intently on the new thing she had been presented with, hand wobbling out to touch at it. Rhaenys beamed with pride and pulled her son in for a hug that might have resulted in broken ribs if the air that whooshed from his body was any indication. She'd done something similar with Lena, I recalled. Here was a woman that was determined to be the world's best grandmother to these kids, not that she had any competition, mind you. That brought another pang of sadness, and I missed Emma Arryn fiercely all over again. Alice though, she barely seemed interested in her egg. Instead her head had flopped to the side to gaze at the window instead. I swallowed the worry that brought. Alanis had said she might be lagging. It was not a sign something was wrong with her. She was just small. She'd catch up eventually, and then I'd likely regret wishing away the days when she was the calmer, quieter one. Laenor pushed my mother's blanket into my arms and I let my head fall against his shoulder for a moment. What's wrong? He asked, attracting everyone else's attention to. I did not want to imply. If I was wrong. I gazed at Alice and her continued interest in the window. Did I do the right thing? I asked, staring down at the falcon on the blanket. Whoever had restored it had done an excellent job. Lena placed a gentle hand on my arm. Remember, worse matches have been made for worse reasons, she murmured. They will understand in time. Thank you, I replied and placed the blanket in with Alice, arranging it by her feet. Laenor took his old wooden sword and propped it up against Jocelyn's crib, much to his mother's amusement. That old thing, she cackled, then gazed at the twins in their cribs. They're both fighters, Rhaenyra. Do not worry about them so much. I awoke that morning to Lena curled close around me, her soft snores causing my hair to twitch slightly. Honestly, if she was going to insist on sleeping by my side so often, she was going to have to start keeping a chest of spare clothes in here. She could not keep sleeping in her dresses. As much as I wanted to let the moment drag on, stay in that warm embrace for as long as possible, duty called. At my first movement, her arms clenched slightly and I huffed with laughter before trying again. This time she let go and I was able to slip free. I got halfway to the door before she sat up, looking puzzled at my absence. I have to feed the twins, Lena, I reminded her. A part of me could not get over my children. Actual children. Twins. 2 girls that were mine. I carried them and birthed them and fed them and they were mine. My babies. Stay and sleep a little longer. She groaned and ignored me, swinging herself free over the bedding and padding after me, still looking half asleep. I need to attend to Luceris as well, she mumbled. Since Alice was finally free of her tank, they'd been put into the same nursery Luceris had been the sole occupant of until recently. Oh, father had made his hints about how Dayron was oh so lonely at the keep, but I couldn't trust it. I needed to know who had poisoned that bottle, who had killed Alice and killed Sarah's future children, before I could even think about moving something as precious as my babes into that place once more. Plus this nursery came equipped with one guard dragon. Luceris' hatchling should probably be in its wicker cage, yet when we entered we found it curled by his crib. Its red eyes rested on us for a moment before it dismissed us and went back to sleep. The room was silent as its 3 and 1 dragon occupants slumbered away, and I paused as I reached my 2, both half covered by the Aran blanket, their eggs laid next to them and their hands entwined. In the soft light of the early morning, my heart wanted to break open at the sight of them. I told you the babes were worth it, mumbled Lena, still unable to shake off the raspiness sleep brought to her voice. Her warm arms encircled my shoulders and she dropped a kiss to my cheek, resting her head on my shoulder. They're perfect. Of course they are, I replied, and she chuckled fondly before parting from me and waking Luceris. He didn't cry, instead he smiled sleepily at his mother and mumbled something that sounded vaguely like, Mama. I wiped the last of the seep from my eyes and retrieved Alice, doing my best to calm her displeasure about being woken so abruptly. Admittedly, Alice wasn't the one given to wailing at every little discomfort like Jocelyn was. She took her meal quietly enough, which was a relief. I wanted to discuss something with you, said Lena, breaking the silence that had fallen between us. I do not know if you will approve. What could be so bad that you fret about my reaction? I asked and she blushed. Worry eased in my gut at that. Lena had a good head for what would have me raging or upset. If the matter was embarrassing to her, then it likely wasn't a huge problem, just personal. I lied to you when I said I did not want another babe, she admitted. I did not laugh in response, but it was a close thing. Instead, I put Alice back in her crib and rocked her back and forth for a while, encouraging the post-meal sleepiness to take her back to the land of Nod. I know that, I told her when it seemed she actually wanted a reply. But I figured you would talk to me in time, when you were ready. Jocelyn was even less happy at being awoken than Alice was, and it took some persuasion to get her to settle down and actually feed. Lena took the time to marshal her thoughts and put Luceris back down. I have spoken to Joffrey about it and he has agreed. I froze and stared at her. You, what if? Will it be healthy for you two? I asked finally. I saw the brief look of pain that spasmed over her features at that. If your only objection is my health, I assure you, I intend to wait. Yet I wanted to let you know. I do want another babe. Joffrey has agreed to be the father. And I note you neatly sidestepped the issue of if you are even able. Evidently it was not something she wanted to think about at the moment. Laenor will explode at this news, I told her dryly, and she smiled. Telling Laenor is Joffrey's job, not mine. Is it not the wife's job to help share her husband's burdens? I teased and she flushed. He's going to be as excitable as when the twins were born, she said with a dramatic shudder. Then her fond smile became a smirk. I'd much rather help my princess with her preparations for today. Ah yes. Today. The day my brothers arrived home. Red and gold banners, a veritable army of Lannisters and a very excitable pale blue dragon announced the arrival of my baby brother to the capital. Gods, they made for an awe-inspiring sight. Even their guards were armed and armored with eye-wateringly expensive equipment. Ostentatious did not even begin to describe it. And they had not come alone. Arriving with them in a significantly less impressive manner were the Tullys, red and blue trout banners fluttering in the brisk winter wind alongside the more resplendent Lannisters. Next to me, Helena was quivering with excitement, her eyes bright. She had missed her brothers, even the horrid Aemond and Daeron did not have the same appeal, I had been informed. I fought a smile as I was reminded of a different arrival. The royal visit the Dragonstone seemed an age ago now. I still had Aegon's picture. I'd ordered it placed in a glass frame to protect it and had it hung in the solar. Not that I got to see it often, but it still served as an adequate reminder that Aegon, no matter what he became later, had been a scared child once. And that I had cared for that scared child despite the threat he represented to me. Do you think he'll be happy to be home? Helena whispered as she watched the party wind its way towards us. The Tully contingent was half the size of the Lannister one, and I had to wonder if they hadn't taken anyone with even a vague claim to the name and golden hair with them for the whole shock and awe process. It might be worth chatting with Joffrey to see that no one is inexplicably left behind. Of course, he'll be happy. He gets to see his favorite sister again, I told her, and her face lit up into a smile. Oh, and you, I suppose. That got her giggling, and I distinctly heard Laenor snort in amusement from where he was trying to pretend he wasn't eavesdropping. Viserys shot us a raised eyebrow, and I controlled my mirth. No doubt he would be thrilled to have all of his children in one place once more. As much as he had been firm in sending my siblings away, it had pained him, no matter what accusations Alicent threw his way. Although, speaking of which, she had been conspicuous in her lateness to this little gathering, and given the way she was looking slightly pale. "Are you well, my queen?" I asked in a low voice. She frowned, dark eyebrows forming an angry V over her eyes. "Merely tired. My sleep has been uneasy of late." "I thank you for your concern," she said finally. Viserys caught my eye, as if trying to judge if offense had been carried in my words. "You have seen Melas. Might I remind you there is still a poisoner on the loose? I would not wish to see you sick or worse. And I do not want the blame if you drop dead in the middle of court, and trust me, if you do I will get the blame. Rhaenyra, I am well enough, it is a mere reaction to the bad weather. Should these symptoms persist I will speak to Melas if that would please you," she snapped, and this time Viserys laid a hand on both our shoulders. "My daughter is merely concerned for you, my love." She gave him a queasy smile but nodded and conceded the point. "But truly, Rhaenyra, it is not appropriate to push such a thing in public." I wanted to protest that it had been genuine worry, if only for my own hide, than a need to show Alicent up, but I was distracted by the party's final arrival and two excitable silver-haired and violet-eyed boys, each eager to greet their father. And he was eager to greet them. He scooped them both up at once, laughing at their delight. When they'd left, he'd struggled to bend and pick one of them up, so great was his waistline. The fact he was ignoring one great lord and one heir probably did not even occur to him. Although Lord Jason Lannister and Elmo Tully did not seem to mind. Instead, they focused preparing their children to meet the king. "Your Grace," Lord Jason said, when Viserys had finally dropped his two sons. "Might I introduce my daughters to you?" 5 blonde-haired girls ranging from the oldest, Jocasta, at 11 to the youngest, Sorel, who was only 3 and looking decidedly unsteady on her feet. Each gave a clearly practiced bow, and Viserys exclaimed compliments regarding their beauty and grace. Their mother, a Westerling by birth I believe, seemed thrilled at the attention they had garnered from him. No doubt they still sought that elusive royal marriage the Lannisters had been denied again and again. From the swell of Lady Johanna's belly there would soon be another Lannister on their way. I'm sure in canon that she doesn't birth a son until later on, but it seemed Jason Lannister had even less luck with producing a son than Boros did. The Lannisters gave their thanks once again for their invitation to the table, so to speak, concerning the war with Dorne. They assured my father their armies would be ready and at our backs. Then they thanked Viserys once again for the royal fostering and ceded the spotlight to the Tullys. Elmo, the only son of the frequently ill Lord Grover Tully, was not what I expected when I thought of a Tully. His hair was a dark brown and his eyes were a similar shade. He wasn't particularly tall or short. In fact, if it weren't for the fact he was in line to inherit the Rivellins, he'd be completely unremarkable. Like Lord Jason, he'd brought his children with him. I'd wonder if he were seeking a royal match, but my own letters had been completely ignored. The oldest, Kermit, was standing by his father, looking bored and disinterested. The other, Oscar, was safely in the grasp of a nearby maid. "Okay, fine, you win." Every time I have to think about the Tullys I get the giggles. As they greeted the king with yet more platitudes regarding Dorne and their princely fosterling, I decided to watch the reunion between brothers and sister. Aegon was quick to embrace Helena, pulling her in for a hug. Like his sister, he'd sprouted a few inches. He'd turned 9 a few weeks after Helena had turned 7, and I'd had a collection of figurines sent to him. Dragons, of course, they are all he would speak of in his letters. I noted, as Aegon detached from Helena and Aemon stepped forward to give his sister a fierce hug, that he wore the dagger I had gifted him so long ago. The one with the dragon hilt with emerald eyes. He caught my gaze and stepped closer. I was relieved to see less fear in his gait now, mostly he just seemed unsure, as if he expected rejection. "Aegon, how has the West treated you?" I asked, managing an easy warmth in my voice. He smiled at that. "Well, sister, the rock is beautiful," he said, relaxing a tad until Helena escaped from Aemon long enough to hiss something into his ear. Aegon blinked and then blushed, stepping forward with his arms out. I swept him into a hug, but he was still tense. So his improvement only went so far. It was a start, something I could build on. All I had to do was maintain a friendly demeanor, play the patient big sister and wait for the ice between us to thaw further. It was somewhat gratifying that whatever Alicent had intended by his squiring in the Westerlands, she had at least paved the way for him to grow from the scared child he had been. Although given the glare I'm getting from Emond and the almost possessive way he's clutching at Helena, I'm going to say I've still got a long way to go with my second brother. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.